welcome to QI, which tonight is a general grab bag of G's. Gifts, gags, genetics, jails and granaries. So let's open the gifts first. And I have been given the most fantastic presents. First out of the box, Jimmy Carr! And Jan Ravens! But what about Clive Anderson? And just what I've always wanted, my very own puppy, Alan Davis! Now, what am I going to get in the buzzer department, I wonder? Jimmy goes... Jan goes... Give me just a little more time. Clive goes... Give me. And Alan goes...
How much is that in the window?
And here's a gift of a question to start with. Suppose you want to send a present to someone in the United States of America. What's the commonest item that is seized by the customs?
Jim, rather enjoying that.
Yes.
Mexicans.
That's a reasonable guess. That's what I'm going to do. I actually have a bag of items.
Of Mexicans?
Can you pass that to Jimmy and you keep one for yourself? And vice versa.
A bag of...
You know what I mean.
What's in the bag?
Well, that's what you have to see. These are all items that may or may not be banned by American customs if you try to cross the border with them.
Chopped pork and ham.
Money. Dirty handkerchiefs.
Dirty handkerchiefs.
There's some seeds and a lottery ticket.
Oh, a cigar.
Well,
Yeah.
money.
Seeds. I bet you're not allowed to have
Yeah.
seeds.
In fact, you're not allowed to have anything that you've got there. But
A shoe?
one of them is the most confiscated... No, not allowed.
I've been to America and I definitely remember wearing shoes. So I'm not sure if that's...
It's a shoe
Is
that's
this-
been to a farm lately in the last month. Yes?
It's got soil on it.
Yes.
The shoe.
Yes.
Okay.
Is this because of Cuba? The Cuban
Exactly
cigar?
right. That is a Cuban cigar, and all
Because they don't-
Cuban...
Is this just indicate if you've got flu or a disease, you can't go in, then you're blowing into your
If you've got a
handkerchief?
hanky that's covered in any amount of human disjecta, any fluids...
And is money too obvious? Is the most obvious one? That
well, it's actually not real money. That's counterfeit money, you may notice. And
I'm going to go shoes.
Shoes...
lottery tickets.
Who tries to...
Lottery tickets. Yeah.
Who tries to import lottery tickets?
I don't know, but you can go to prison for 2 years for bringing in lottery tickets.
It's worth it if it's a £10 million prize, $10 million prize.
Yes. So, anyway, which do you think is the item most common?
Hessian bags.
Hessian bags are also illegal, you're right. The bag itself can't
It's
be
probably made out of
imported.
hemp.
You get an extra point for that.
Yeah.
It is actually rhymes with Tinder egg.
Kinder egg.
Kinder
Yeah,
eggs.
the egg with the secret surprise in it.
Is it because you can very
This is
easily
a cream egg.
open them
Is it 'cause
and then
a
fill
child
them with
may
heroin?
easily-
No, because it poses...
A child may easily choke on the small
Exactly.
parts.
Or in that
Little
poetic
mini
phrase, it poses a choking and aspiration.
Oh, that's happening now. It's happening now.
Oh, no!
Quick, get a medical...
That is a cream egg.
Yeah, cream egg.
Is it tidy up time now?
You can tidy up, thank you
Tidy
very
up
much.
time, okay.
Yeah. Well, the fact is, there is the surprise toy egg, which is the most confiscated item, and all imports from Cuba. And the bizarre thing is, for 17 years in a row, the United Nations has deemed what illegal?
The United States boycott, is that what you're...
Yes, the United States boycott on all things Cuban has, for 17 years in a row, been deemed illegal by all United Nations countries except
Cuba.
Israel and the Pacific state of Palau. It's quite a unanimous voice for the United Nations.
Have you been to Cuba in one of your many journeys?
Sadly not.
I haven't. You can, in fact, get a flight from Miami. They say there aren't any flights, but you can. And a lot of people do it. And they have huge restrictions on what you can take in there. So everybody goes in these huge numbers of coats, because they're visiting their friends and family. They want to give them stuff. So they all have 5 hats on, 6 coats, loads and loads of trousers.
In tropical weather.
Yes, and they look like sort of Michelin men who get on there. And I was the only one there not overdressed for once. And
They're looking at you thinking, cheapskate. No mates, one
yes,
coat.
exactly.
Do you know what's happened in terms of legality to the famed Academy Awards goodie bag as well?
Well, you've probably been to them. You get a big bag of stuff when you go to the Oscars.
If you're a nominee or a
It's so valuable now you can't take it out of the country. Is that what it is?
No, it's not that. It's that you have to declare it against tax.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the 2008 goodie bags were worth £57,000.
Holy smoke.
That's just a goodie bag.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, I know. So the contents of the 2008 goodie bag for the Oscars was a £15,000 holiday, an espresso machine, cashmere blanket worth £855, I hope it was tartan. Cash me a cheque. Cash me a cheque. And a white gold pearl and diamond pendant worth £740.
Actually, that is disgusting. That's truly disgusting what you've just read out.
Is
there.
it?
Should be brought over here and distributed at the BAFTAs.
Yes, the poor old bastard, you know, we get...
Yeah, a lollipop.
Yeah.
You actually do get a lollipop.
You get Tic Tacs.
Yeah, it is.
You used to at the Comedy Awards, didn't you? Have sort of bowls of minstrels.
Huge amounts of alcohol and very little food. Oh, and they've all got drunk. How did that happen? Somebody said something controversial. It's not that we planned it or anything.
Looks a lummy.
Can we just find out, because you know everything, Stephen, what happens to all the Swiss Army penknives and nail clippers and things which are confiscated in the airport when you go in? Huge piles of them are confiscated. What happens to them? Do they give it away to charity?
You know when you lose your hair gel or whatever they pinch off you because you've forgotten to put it in your thing? Well, on your way out of the airport, when you leave, you should get
Just
take something.
anything from it. I think it's a
Take
very
an
good
item.
idea.
Kind of help yourself box.
Yeah.
Conditioner, I need some conditioner. Only one thing, don't be greedy.
The
They're all
cigars...
very well groomed, aren't they? All those kind of guys that work in customs. They've all got very well trimmed nails, very well plucked eyebrows.
You're
No
right.
accident.
If a horse got a stone in its hoof, they're first, isn't they? I can do that one.
They burn, of course, the contraband cigars one by one, quite slowly. I'll tell you bizarrely, what is legal to import is what Americans call a switchblade, we call a flick knife, but only if you can satisfy one condition. Only one type of person is allowed to...
It's a fisherman, isn't it?
No.
Teddy boy.
Oh, a gang member.
No, think about what distinguishes a switchblade or flick knife from any other kind of knife.
You're a one-armed person.
You've got a good brain, Clive Anderson. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So if you got caught with a switchblade and you were worried about getting into trouble,
Chop
could you
your
hack
arm
your
off.
arm?
Yeah, exactly. There you got it. There you are.
And put it in your hand luggage.
Yes, exactly.
Reattaching later.
But fishermen are supposed to use them sensibly, because when you're catching a fish, you have to get a knife to cut the line or something. That was always a justification.
Yes.
Defence we always used to use.
Anyway, chocolate eggs with toys in are the commonest items seized by the US Customs, followed by Cuban cigars. But what happened to the box of chocolates that Gordon Brown gave to George W. Bush?
Presumably they just chucked it away.
You're absolutely right, Clive. Under Secret Service rules, any gift of food or drink are destroyed upon receipt, no matter who gives them. So
In front of him.
Yeah. Gordon Brown gave a £150 box of Charbonnel Walker chocolates.
Money well spent.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
The Qatari PM gave a £650 box of chocolate and fruit, an assortment of nut pasties from the Iraqi president, and £3 worth of live shamrocks from Bertie Ahern to celebrate St Patrick's Day were all destroyed.
So why did he give them the chocolates then? That seems
Well,
rather poor.
we actually called Downing Street to
Yes.
ask. We said, come on, surely you knew the rules. They did not favour us with a reply. Do you know what Gordon Brown's present to Obama was? It was an inedible ornamental pen holder, but it was made from the timbers of a Victorian anti-slaver called the HMS Gannet. And he received in return a slightly less historically...
Slave.
I know what this is, because this was reported at the time, wasn't it?
Obama being very ironic.
DVDs of films.
25 American classic DVDs.
Did Obama give him a copy of Nailin' Palin?
I don't know. Nailin' Palin.
Nailin' Palin was a film made last year about Sarah
Oh,
Palin.
a porn movie, all right.
Well, not a porn.
No?
Porn's a very subjective term. It's gentleman's special interest.
Gentleman's special.
Film is very good.
Is it?
Was she actually in it, or is it somebody, a looky-likey?
It's a looky-likey, but it'll do.
Delighted to hear it. Well, well.
So what
Goodness
were the
me.
classic... He gave him some classic
25
DVDs.
classic... Well, there's people speculate there may have been Region 1, in which case, of course, he couldn't have watched them unless he had a hacked DVD player. And
He was not going to watch them
there's him
anyway.
getting other presents there.
Oh, it's had the eyes taken out of it, so it's not joking, has it?
Why do they give each other these presents? Because if they're too expensive, they can't give them.
Protocol.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the answer.
Why don't they just agree to give something to charity? They could just say, we're not giving presents this trip.
I'm planting a tree.
Yes, good idea.
Buying
the
an
most
animal
annoying thing in the
Africa.
world. Have you ever had that as a present from a friend? I had that.
What?
Someone adopted some sort of panda for me. I'd rather the CD, thanks very much.
Well, they name a star after you. I don't want a star.
I'm already a star, you say. Yes.
And then they're sick.
Also, when you adopt a panda, I worry, well, if the people looking after the panda, if anything happens to them, is it my responsibility?
Yes.
Is it they come and live with me? And it looks like I've already been hitting it.
You're silly. Now, all food gifts to the President of the United States are automatically destroyed by burning. Speaking of worthless gifts, name and shame the world's cheapest cheapskate.
Was it Diogenes the Cynic?
Wow.
Oh, you've
Tell
seen
me
this show
more.
before, haven't you?
Well, oh yes.
I think you're slightly aroused.
I can confirm slightly.
Well, Diogenes the Cynic was a famous cheapskate in the ancient world, and he lived in a barrel.
He did.
And he eschewed material possessions, apart from a loincloth and a little bowl so he could drink water. And then apparently he saw a little boy drinking water from the river just with his hands, and so he eschewed the bowl as well, leaving him with just the loincloth and the barrel.
It's a very good answer. It's a good human answer, but there's
Are we still looking for somebody else?
There's an animal answer, yeah.
Tight-fisted animal.
There's a species of insect that gives gifts. Because
yes.
that's our theme, really, gifts.
Oh, the sort of male gives a gift to the female.
In order to
bit of a
mate.
leaf
To
or
mate,
something
yes.
like that.
Yeah, and it's particularly prevalent amongst males who are afraid of being eaten by their mates.
Oh, things
so
like-
it's to
yeah.
distract them.
Praying mantises and things
Yeah,
like that.
insects and flies of various kinds.
The black widow spider.
Well, the spider famously does that, hence the name, obviously, the black widow, because it eats...
Terribly exciting and erotic, isn't it? The idea that you've got this huge female you're trying to have sex with, you give her a gift, and if it's the wrong gift, she'll eat you.
Yeah, it's the ultimate, isn't it?
What's the, well, you must
You
have
get the
feel
same-
like that in your collection.
Yeah, no, you get that with sort of, you know, you brought back KFC, she goes, no, I wanted Nando's. She's livid, you're out.
Yeah. Well, there are these flies called the dance flies, and they are often the gift is wrapped in silk or in a balloon formed from the male's anal secretions.
I'm sorry, but it's
What?
Wow.
That's just what I wanted, darling.
But there is a species called Rhamphomia sulcata, which captures an insect, sucks out its innards completely, and then wraps the empty shell in silk and then gives it to the female. By the time the female's unwrapped it to discover that, as it were, her box of chocolates is empty, he's already mated her and scarpered.
Yes. So don't try this at home.
Very good tips.
Yeah, so that
Here's your box of chocolates.
we reckon that was possibly the greatest cheapskate in the animal kingdom.
I heard a great story recently about someone being on a date with a guy, and he leaned over to her plate, took a massive bit of her food, without saying anything, and ate it. Did it again like 30 seconds later. Did it again for the third time. And all she said was, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm paying for it, aren't I?"
Wow!
Magnificently cheap
On
thing.
so
I've ever
many
heard.
levels, that is just... wow.
Staggering.
Anyway, so there you are. That's that particular dance fly. There are others who do strange things. There are some insects, male insect, pretends to be female so that another male gives it a present, which it then steals and then gives to another female. So the male dance fly is probably the cheapest cheapskate we know of. Now, what would you call someone who never laughs?
That bloke.
Yeah, right. He hasn't cracked a smile all evening, has he? No.
He might be dead. Nudge him.
Yeah.
Are we looking for a sort of a phobia word?
Yeah, age-elastic, meaning that they don't laugh. And there are people who don't have it, who, it seems, have no sense of
Physically
humour.
can't laugh.
Well, who knows? I mean, there's a sort of epilepsy where you... a lot, which is an unusual affect.
That was shocking.
It's giving you a shock.
I've got an interesting sort of Greek-type word for something that I do sometimes, where I can't help the sort of urge to do an impression of somebody. And sometimes if somebody's got like a limp or a bit of a funny walk, I kind of want to go along with it, which is a terrible thing to do. And apparently, when you do this thing of wanting to take on somebody's limp in an inappropriate way, it's called echopraxia.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
if you do it with words, with trying to imitate a person sort of verbally, it's echolalia. That's
is
great,
very
isn't it?
Points.
Yes.
Points.
Isn't it great?
Brilliant.
It's also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's called taking the piss as well.
Yeah.
Well, it almost defines being a human, doesn't it, laughter? Because animals don't laugh.
Yeah.
They don't have that capacity to sort of put the two things together.
Very,
and
very
do it.
social as well. It's a very social sort of...
Yes.
People tend not to laugh on their own. Like, even watching a show as hilarious as this.
Yes.
At home on your own, you won't laugh in the same way as the studio
No.
audience. It's why people often think it's sort of canned laughter rather than you are genuinely laughing at bits.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't if there were anybody here. But
Yeah.
Because there's that sort it's a very social thing. You're sort of
Yes, you're
showing
right.
someone else that you get the
Yeah.
thing and you understand.
Absolutely, it is a communal thing. There are people in history who are said to be age-elastic, including Isaac Newton, who was supposed to have laughed once in his life when someone asked
when an
him
apple
what...
fell on his head.
No. Someone asked him what was the point of studying Euclid, and he burst out laughing at that.
Yeah, no, that is a good one. though.
That is a good one. Yeah.
What is he like?
According to Marshal Zhukov, Stalin, next door, he didn't laugh. And
I'm
next
amazed
to-
at that. He seems such a chirpy cat.
And then
can't tell behind his
you probably
moustache, he could be
spotted
chuckling.
Jonathan Swift and William Ewart Gladstone.
Jonathan Swift was a very funny writer, so...
I know,
Lots
it's
of
bizarre.
comedians don't laugh.
Spinoza.
You know, lots of comedians are quite miserable in real life, aren't they? Not us, obviously.
The bloke on the left and the bloke on the middle are the same.
No, but on the left, he's been on the diet.
That's an advert for the Chin Gym.
Yeah.
The one on the left is Isaac Newton,
That's Newton, right?
and the one in the middle is Jonathan Swift. Trollope, on the other hand, Anthony Trollope...
Couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah, he died giggling, apparently. He laughed a lot.
Didn't he work in the post office? That's probably what
He did.
He went postal. He was...
Yeah. He invented the postbox
yes.
and lived to regret it, actually.
Because once he was in, he couldn't get out.
He was sorry for a very odd reason, actually. He was very old-fashioned about what women should and shouldn't do. And what he hadn't predicted was what the post office would suddenly allow women to communicate with anyone freely. Because before the postbox, they would have to go to their father or a servant who would put the stamp on, and it would be taken. And suddenly they were able to send their own letters and have relationships without their parents' consent. And he resented this.
What has he done?
It is a law, the law of unintended
Unintended
consequences,
consequences,
exactly. Bizarre thought. Anyway,
Good
quite
old
irrelevant.
Trollope.
There are theories of laughter. There's the superiority theory, which is the sudden glory we feel when we see someone suffer.
It's very
That's a
simple, the
crazy game.
superiority theory, but a lot of people don't understand it.
Very good. There's the incongruity theory. It arises when the decorous and logical abruptly dissolves into the low and absurd. We wouldn't farting well want that. For example. Not that I would say that. The relief theory, which is Freud. The naughtiness of the joke liberates the laughter from inhibitions about forbidden thoughts and feelings.
That's watching Jackass for me, I do.
Yeah. You've written a book about it. What was The Naked Jape?
The Naked Jape. I wrote a book with my friend Lucy about jokes. And the nature of jokes.
Did you come to a theory about...
No, I mean, they are all... You can analyse... There's all these different sort of theories from around the world, and they're all pretty much nonsense.
Yeah.
They all work in exactly the same way, though. All jokes are sort of two stories. So the first story makes you make an assumption, and then the second story makes you
Subverts it,
realise
yeah.
that the assumption was
I like the one
erroneous.
where the Englishman, a Scotsman and an Irishman go into a pub and the barman says, what is this, some kind of joke?
Yes.
A sort of a meta joke.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
When I told them I wanted to be a comedian, they laughed. Well, they're not laughing now.
That is...
It's Monkhouse.
Bob Monkhouse, yeah. That's a brilliant
But it's hard when you're writing about comedy to make it funny as well. Were you trying to be funny as you went along, or did you just...
in the end, we just had to put a joke on every page, because some of it's a bit sort of more complicated. And there's a great quote about analysing jokes is like dissecting a frog. No one's that interested, and the frog dies.
Yes. Yes. Pulling up the roots of a plant to look how it works.
Yeah, and killing it as you do it, exactly. Anyway, age-elasts are people who don't laugh at gags. And now answer me this. Who is responsible for the oldest joke in the world?
Just a little more time.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who was responsible for the oldest joke in the world, but I can tell you something quite interesting about who was the subject of the first impression recorded in the world, which was Socrates.
Really?
In a play by Aristophanes called The Clouds. And the interesting thing about it was that this portrayal resulted in him being put on trial about 20 years later and put to death for being a corruptive youth.
And who
So
starred
they
was it?
used the
They used-
impression of him in the play as a kind
As
of...
evidence in
Yeah.
this trial. So, you know, David Steele complains about his spitting image puppet ruining his political career, you know, or
so
whatever.
extended.
But yeah, the first ever recorded impression, because I was doing the show about impressions many years ago now, and trying to sort of find out, were there impressions sort of around before, you know, recorded media?
Exactly.
Was there enough widely recognised characters? But in Greek, in Athens, everybody was a citizen and everybody knew everybody else. Characters like Socrates would be very widely
Well known.
recognised.
Whereas presumably in the 19th century you couldn't do, you know, Disraeli or Gladstone because there was too big a population and too few people would ever have heard them speak to know whether it was accurate.
I was told that at the Establishment Club they did the first ever when Harold Macmillan went down to see Peter Cook. And
it was not at the Establishment Club. It was on the Fortune Theatre. Yeah. What happened was that Peter Cook did a very famous. It was the first time a prime minister had really been done. It was of Superman. The sketch was called.
Some of our
That's
people
right,
couldn't run a violent
Sappy,
at time.
urgent,
He talked about
vibrant
how
young satirist.
he went to see the German Chancellor here and there, and how Britain can act as an honest broker in the world. Certainly no nation is more honest, and it's certain also that no nation is broker.
Well, someone said to me that it was illegal to impersonate a real person. You couldn't do an impression of someone that was...
Well, it wasn't that it was
The
specifically
monarch, I
illegal.
think.
It's just that there was a fellow called the Lord Chamberlain whose job was to censor plays.
And that act was the fault of Impressionists.
Really?
Because Robert Walpole, in 1737, who set it up, he was fed up with having the mickey taken out of him by all these satirical playwrights like Fielding and Congreve, so he set up the Lord Chamberlain's Act in order that they couldn't take their mickey out of him any longer. All that
And the
time
reason
ago,
why
and
they
then
set
it
up the
didn't get repealed.
Establishment Club and places like that, because you didn't have to submit your scripts to the Lord Chamberlain because it was a private members' club. So that's how they...
And I think it latterly it became like the living monarch rather than... I mean, politicians, it sort of relaxed.
And you would
a bit,
never
didn't
do the living monarch, would you?
No, I never would, no. In a million years.
Well, these are all excellent. I mean, there are records of jokes. There's one here, which is a pretty old Greek joke. There was an absent-minded professor who, on a sea voyage, when a storm blows up, and his slaves are weeping in terror at the storm, and he says, "Don't cry, I have freed you all in my will." That's a joke, apparently. Slave-related humour there. But the Abderites were the characters who were stereotyped as incredibly stupid. And it's a really frustrating joke. It's joke 114 in the Philogelos, the joke book, an ancient joke book. This Abderite asks a eunuch how many children he has, you see? And the eunuch goes, "Duh, oh, right, none, I'm a eunuch." So the Abderite says, and the fragment is missing, so we don't have the punchline. So I'm inviting you to provide the punchline. OK, how many children have you got, eunuch? And the eunuch says, "I don't have any, I'm a eunuch." And the Abderite, who's thick, says...
How many grandchildren, then?
Oh, very good. Wow, excellent. How many grandchildren? Oh, yeah,
But it's
possible.
Yeah. How possible, guys?
I like working with old material.
The oldest joke, when I was researching the book, the oldest joke I found that still sort of works and was recognisable, and I've seen performed on stage. It was an old Greek joke, and it was a barber says to a man, "How do you want your hair cut?" And the man says, "In silence." Still kind of still a recognisable joke, but that's an old...
Well, there's a much older one. There's a Sumerian one, which is from 1900 BC, which is really pretty old, which is a saying that something that has never occurred since time immemorial, a young woman did not fart in her husband's lap.
Don't open with it, Stephen, don't open with it. You can work it into the set somewhere.
Time immemorial in those days is just like week last Tuesday.
Yeah, well, that's... Or one of the oldest English ones is, what is the most cleanliest leaf amongst all other leaves? It is holly leaves, for no one will wipe their arse with them. So, as you see, humour was, in those days, seemed to be obsessed with farts and bottoms.
Yes.
We've moved on from there, thank goodness. Yeah.
Farting in the lap, I don't understand.
I don't.
Is anyone doing it?
For the first time, a young woman did not fart in her husband's
So women
lap.
probably weren't allowed to have chairs in those days. There weren't enough chairs. Chairs were expensive. Only the man would have a chair, the woman would be on his lap and would fart there.
All the time. And once there was a woman who didn't, and that was worthy of report.
She hasn't farted.
It's a very interesting joke. Anyway, but here is a good gag. What sort of person wears one of these?
Lord.
You can try it on yourself if you like.
Oh, this is a good idea.
It's got little... Ooh. What is that?
Sound of polystyrene.
Yeah, I know. There you are. Sorry, it is, isn't it? It's something...
Oh, this is a tongue thing.
Yeah?
This is to stop... I can't remember what it's called. They've got one of these in the Museum of Torture down in near where the clink is. And you put it in.
You can open the side somehow as well, so that bit goes in the mouth, you're right.
It stops the
know
your
what they're
lady
called?
talking. I can't remember what they're called.
That's it.
Does the word pony boy come in this answer? I don't know.
Pony boy?
Yes.
Excuse me. That's it. Oh, I say, it fits you rather well.
Oh, and it's got stuck.
It sounded like you're having an idea then, Steve. Quite disconcerting.
Giddy up.
No, you really... You've given me a thought there, Alan. I must say. I've been scrubbed and brought to my room.
Actually, don't bother to have him scrubbed. Is that called? Anybody know?
A wicked kegel.
So close.
A wicked kegel. I'm going to go. I can't
What's the answer, Alan? Let's do the letters. One for yes. Is it A?
It's,
Is it a device used for pigs when they're constipated? I'm pretty sure that's one of those, isn't it? Sorry, Alan, I probably should have said before. What they do is they strap it on, they ram it home.
So it's a sort of chastity belt for the face. Is that what
it's known as a scold's bridle.
Scold's bridle.
That's it.
Oh, so when she's being ducked in the
Ideally,
river
though,
or
you've got to
something
get
like
it before he
that?
says it.
Yeah. Punishment for being a scold, you're ducked in the water.
The other punishment, the more common punishment, was what's called a cucking stool, which is often called a ducking stool. Quite wrongly, it is actually a cucking stool. But anyway,
Excuse me, that's the wrong word. It's not. Get me off the cucking stool!
So who had to wear one of these other
Nagging
than Alan?
wives.
well, nagging, malicious, spiteful, gossipy women. The male equivalent of scolding and gossiping is barratry, and a barrator was a male equivalent. But oddly enough, there are no real records of these being used. There are 50 of them in Britain at the moment. This is the replica of one that comes from Walton-on-Thames. Oh, there are more of them there. Look at that.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
One's being made to look like a dog as well, just as a sort of an additional punishment.
Yeah, that second one's not very practical, is it? Is that sticking out the front or the back of the head?
What's going on there?
Look at the front so she can breathe.
That's the male version. That's the beard. You can see the beard. That must be for
so
a
he can-
barrator. There you are. So, for a bit of fun with genetics now, what do you get if you cross a caterpillar with a butterfly?
Oh, a butterpillar.
Should have said the other one.
Can I just...
Caterfly. I feel such a fool.
Can I just... I'm reading a book at the moment, and I haven't finished it, about a very, very hungry caterpillar.
Yes.
Because I kind of think I might know where it's going, but I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
So are you saying there's some
haven't looked at it,
species that reproduces halfway through its life cycle?
No, there is a theory that a man has put forward, which is that actually they are different species. I know this sounds insane.
Oh, what he's done there is he's not understood.
Fair enough.
That's what's happened. Fair enough, because it is complicated and you might not... Was it Alan that put this forward?
I'll tell you his name. His name is Donald Williamson, formerly of the University of Liverpool. It's called hybridogenesis, apparently. Now, it does seem pretty off the wall to say that they're two different species, but he has some...
That's a fantastic idea, though. 'Cause
It is an
you wouldn't say
amazing
they'd be in the
idea.
same club or anything to
You know,
meet,
but
or-
sometimes you see an old guy, like in Saint-Tropez, with a really beautiful
Yes.
young girl, and you think, well, maybe. So it could be a similar thing. Maybe the caterpillars had a lot of money.
There's no such thing as an ugly rich bloke.
Williams, his star witness in this was a starfish called Luidia sarsi. It starts life as a small larva with a tiny starfish inside. As the larva grows, the starfish migrates to the outside, and the larva settles on the seabed, and they separate. This is normal. But in this one, something remarkable happens. Instead of degenerating, the larva swims off and lives for several months as an independent animal. It's as if the caterpillar and the butterfly were alive at the same time. And he reasons, the point is that for millions and upon millions of years, particularly in the sea, sperm and seed have been mixed of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different species. And just once every million of years, they happen to create a double species. He thinks it's not impossible. We're not sure whether we believe it, but we're intrigued by its possibilities. There are other candidates for hybridogenesis, such as the tadpole and the frog. But why did Luigi from Bologna galvanise his frogs?
We've had a clue from this already. Jimmy mentioned this. He invented the idea of putting electricity through
Luigi
frogs.
did. Do you know what his surname was?
But it's something like Galvin. I think it's a Galvin or some Italian...
Galvani.
Galvani, there we are.
Hence...
Galvanisation.
Galvanising, exactly. And his nephew, who was a star pupil of his, came over to England and demonstrated all around Europe and amazed the Britons with his thing. He took particularly the Royal College of Surgeons by storm in 1803 when he convulsed the body of a murderer called George Foster. It's rather bizarre.
Sorry, he did what?
Convulsed with electricity, the dead body of a
Putting
murderer.
electricity to it sparks it into life again.
Yeah, he'd just been hanged. The results
That's a
were very
hell.
dramatic.
So that was Britain's Got Talent. What year? That is a hell of an act, isn't it?
It is a bit of
Even
an act.
Piers Morgan's going to like that.
The rods were applied to Foster's mouth and ear, and the jaw began to quiver, and one eye opened. And when a rod was moved to touch the rectum, the whole body convulsed so as to almost give an appearance of reanimation.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
Well, you'd think. It made a strong impression on the minds of scientists.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Why a murderer as well? I've got a murderer here. We're going to bring him back to life. Put electricity through anyone. Sorry.
Well, that's it. You see, the point is...
It shows the nerves use electricity to work.
Well, people previously thought it was like a sort of pneumatic power. But also, we know that Mary Shelley read about this.
Ah.
And so this idea that electricity was the life force, the thing that gave us life, was electricity. And she, of course, wrote Frankenstein, which oddly enough, doesn't use electricity too.
It does in the films, though, doesn't it? But,
It does in all the films,
It's a very
yeah.
weird book. This,
And,
this
we-
murderer guy, did he get... sorry to go back to him,
Yeah.
but did they ask his permission before they hanged him? And do you mind, after you... But we're going to make you a bit of an exhibit of you. Was this
Sadly
just
doubt it. I fear not. And
He didn't have a donor card or
what's
anything.
worrying me
Well,
is...
he might have got a bit of a lesser sentence as a result. We'll hang you slightly quicker if you do it.
But galvanised iron and a galvanised bucket, how does that work?
You must run electricity through it so it attracts other metals like aluminium or something to sort of...
You'd think, but
How do
oddly
buckets
enough,
work? You put stuff in
No,
them?
no, how the galvanised buckets are.
In
No,
the same way, you just put stuff in them?
No, it's coated with zinc, which resists corrosion, and in fact, it's not. There's
Nothing to do with that
nothing
at
to
all.
do. It's a misnomer entirely. There you are. Quite interesting. Luigi Galvani discovered that electric shocks make muscles twitch, leading people to wonder whether electricity might contain the gift of life. Now to something completely disconnected. Where are 1% of American adults?
Oh, I imagine we could find out, couldn't we? We could use Google Earth, because some of them are quite big. There's one. He's got his own postcode.
1% of the population, which is what's the population? It's about.
300 million, isn't it?
So you're talking about between 2.5 and 3 million, say.
Jail.
So yes. G for jail. English spelling of jail, of course, but it is G for jail.
Really, that
Yeah.
many people? 3 million people are locked up.
Well, 2.3, which
See,
is
all-
1 in every 99.1 adults.
All of those guys there are innocent as well, because they all were arrested for having switchblades, but they've all only got one arm.
Well spotted. Proportionally, the Americans are prison more than twice as many as South Africans, more than 3 times as many as the Iranians, more than 6 times as many as the Chinese. No society in history has imprisoned more of its citizens than the United States of America.
We do pretty well, though, don't we? We sort of top
don't-
the European League.
We're ahead of China, Turkey and India.
Yes.
Yeah, with 148 prisoners per 100,000.
It's the 3 strikes and they're out.
That's-
sort of thing
that's been the
really bumped
problem,
it up
yeah.
recently.
I mean, a legal system based on baseball just seems bizarre.
Yes.
People don't seem to understand the law. It's all very complicated. What's simple? What do people like? Baseball. Right then. Here's the rule.
3 strikes and you're out, yeah.
Mental.
What it means is if the first 2 strikes, the first 2 crimes you're convicted of are serious enough, the third one, no matter how trivial, will get a life sentence, 25 years or more. So, for example, Leandro Andrade is serving 2 consecutive 25-year terms for shoplifting 9 videotapes. Or...
He took 9?
Yes. Kevin Webber, 26 years for stealing 4 chocolate chip cookies. It's astonishing.
It's really stupid, isn't it? Because if you know you're on this sort of deal...
Yeah.
Take 5.
Yes, yes.
That is the idea, obviously.
Do another murder. Do a bank job. There's no point...
There's no point doing anything trivial.
If
No,
you're
I know.
gonna get caught.
It is a bit bonkers. But the racial numbers are a bit worrying. And the gender numbers, it's 1 in 30 men aged 20 to 34 is behind bars. But for black males, that's 1 in 9. 1 in 9. There are more 17-year-old black people in jail than in college in America. So 5% of the world are American, 25% of all prisoners
Isn't the real
are American.
controversy with this the business end of it?
Well, that's true. It's also, as you say, right, it is a business.
Because it's not just licence plate, they make loads of stuff.
Well, one of the things I should have said when talking about contraband is that you're not allowed to bring into America anything that's been made by forced labour or prisons. But in America, you could almost say, if you were so minded, that they've reinvented the slave trade. They produce, for example, 100% of all military helmets, ammunition belts, bulletproof vests, ID tags and other items of uniform, 93% of domestically produced paints, 36% of home appliances, 21% of office furniture, which allows the United States to compete with factories in Mexico because, of course, obviously the workers can't refuse to work for 25 cents an
I
hour.
very much like to say something hilarious, but something must be done.
It is.
Should we...
It feels
a bit more
astonishing.
question-timey to say.
It is a bit amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's slavery by the back door.
Exactly, wasn't it?
Which is another video that I've got.
If you're in prison, is there an incentive for you to work?
You get solitary confinement if you refuse to work. Yeah, more than 1 in 100 American adults are in jail. But now we're off to another location, beginning with G. Why didn't the Emperor of China like pigeons?
Pigeon flew into my house today.
Pigeon flew?
Yeah. Pigeon.
Oh, I see. Right, sorry.
This isn't the first emperor. He was the terracotta army chap. If he was building lots of terracotta statues over, he wouldn't want the pigeons to come and splatter them.
Do you think the terracotta army was a mistake? Do you think it was... He said, look, I need an army.
He meant the territorial army, is what he was trying to say.
Amongst other gifts that pigeons have, one of the best known is...
Message carrying.
Message carrying, because they can carry message,
They're
because
homing.
because
They come back.
they
They
come
go
back.
wherever they live, they
So
go home again.
criminals used pigeons, basically, against property of the emperor, namely his granaries. He had huge rice granaries, and what these people would do is they'd train their pigeons, hundreds and hundreds of them. They'd fly to the granaries.
Yes.
They'd eat all the rice, or as much rice as they could carry in them, and fly back home. Then they'd be fed water and alum, which would make them disgorge all the rice,
Yes.
which would then be washed, and they could get £50 from every 100 pigeons, £50
So
of
why
rice.
didn't they just eat the pigeons? They could...
I bet they did that as well.
Yes.
Pigeons are very delicious.
It would be like stuffed pigeon, wasn't it? With the sort of risotto kind of thing.
It's only one meal, though, isn't it? Once you don't shoot the messenger.
That's it.
That's a pretty ingenious crime, though.
Isn't
Did they
it?
get caught?
I don't know. I just simply don't know.
I was once given a pair of homing pigeons, and you keep them for a bit, and then they fly back to where you bought them from. It's a brilliant, it's a brilliant scheme.
Isn't that perfect? Damn. No, well, you see, Chinese homing pigeons were used to steal grain from the imperial granary. With 100 pigeons, you could steal £50 of rice a day. And now it gives me enormous pleasure to say that it's general ignorance time again, so fingers on buzzers if you would. What mischief did Cornish wreckers get up to?
Oh, I imagine it involved the gene pool, didn't it?
Jan.
The wreckers lit fires and lured boats onto the rocks by pretending they... Is that going to be a...
You're thinking of mermaids.
It sounded good. I was totally sold on that idea.
Well, the weird
They
thing,
did.
that is the myth, but they didn't. There's no record of it ever happening. No contemporary source mentions the practice in Cornwall. There was one
Well, people
accusation in Anglesey, but that turned out not to result in a
Weren't people
conviction.
hanged for this sort of crime?
No,
for...
because it didn't. There's no record
Never
of
happened?
it. There's only records of it in novels like
Jamaica Inn
Jamaica Inn,
by
exactly.
Daphne du Maurier.
Which you know all about because I happen to know you won Celebrity Mastermind, and what was your specialist subject?
It was Daphne du Maurier,
Daphne du
curiously.
Maurier,
Yeah.
wow.
But I'm very surprised at this, actually.
No, it
because,
seems that it was invented, many people believe, by Methodist preachers who wished to portray the Cornish as barbarous people in need of chapel. And it was taken up by Victorian romantic novelist and Daphne du Maurier, your heroine. Yeah.
Stuff you learn on this programme.
Yeah, and it was repeated in a history of Cornwall by the Reverend Sabine Baring Gold, who wrote Onward Christian Soldiers.
Yes.
And was the subject of a rather strange, typically Victorian story where he was at a children's party and there was a little girl and he said, "And whose little girl are you?" And the little girl burst into tears and said, "Yours, Daddy." He did have 15 children, but it's still a bit shocking.
Yeah.
That's nearly as bad as the comedian who did an act and an agent approached him after and said, "I think you're very, very good. Do you have representation? Who's your agent?" And he said, "You are."
Oh, dear. Edward James, the great art collector, recalled in his autobiography his mother shouting one Sunday morning, "Nanny, Nanny, I'm going to church. I want one of my daughters to go with me." And then he said, very good, miss. Mrs. James, which one? He said, "Oh, the one with the red hair. She'll go with this coat." That's parenthood.
Yes.
There you go. Anyway, it seems, sadly, that wreckers may have made a living salvaging stuff from shipwrecks, but there's no evidence that they ever deliberately lured ships onto the rocks. How could Archimedes have moved the Earth? Yay.
I fear I may say something. He could have made love to me like a wild man.
Didn't he say he just wanted a fulcrum big enough and then he could use a lever to move the Earth? Was that him?
Yeah, I said that, but he couldn't have done it.
Well, I'm only quoting him. I'm saying...
Well, he didn't say with a lever. He said...
It's your best available source.
Surely the best way to move the Earth is some sort of montage with a Coldplay song. Sort of sporting achievements and then a great... Maybe
Yes.
Take That's Greatest Day.
You'll be saying next that Archimedes' screw wasn't up to much either.
I'm sure it was. No, he did say, Dos moi pu sto kai kino tain gain. Give me a place to stand and I will move the Earth. That is the point. He discovered the power of the lever.
Oh, he was big, wasn't he?
He was a bit... One of our elves worked out that if he weighed 100 kilograms, which is sort of reasonable, I suppose, and he placed his fulcrum a kilometre away from the bottom of the Earth, in order to balance the planet, he would need a lever 6.5 billion light years long. And assuming he could find a lever long and stiff enough, and he moved his end 1 metre, the Earth would move by a distance less than the diameter of a single proton.
He wasn't to
You
be
lost
taken
me very early on in
He
that
wasn't to be
story.
taken
I'm sorry.
literally, Stephen, for goodness sake.
No,
I'm
just out of
being
interest.
penalised. The fact that you're taking his words as though he meant it, he was actually going to do it. He was merely...
No, but I'm asking how he could have.
Who's he on the phone to? Is that Newton? Is that Newton? This isn't working.
That's Socrates. I saw a play about you.
It's lever you sold me.
Do we all move the Earth every time we walk around, in a literal sense? Does it move a little
Well,
bit? Because there's that fact about if everyone in China at the same
Jumped up
time
and down,
jumped
yes.
up and down, they'd be livid.
It said, did you put my toga in with that red towel?
No, well, if you jump up, according to Newtonian insight, you could move the Earth by a tiny amount, but it would move back. It would cancel itself out in accordance with the third law of motion, so the jumping up and down thing would cancel itself out. But in theory, that
So all
would
that
work.
effort getting everyone in China to do that, so a complete waste of time.
It is, unfortunately.
Speaking
it would be fun,
literally,
though.
literally.
Archimedes would have moved the Earth more by jumping in the air and shouting Eureka than by using a lever. This is all we have time for this week, so it's time to look at the scores. Oh, my goodness, oh, my gracious, oh, my good heavens. Our winner is the first time Jan Ravens with 6 points. Plus 6. And in second place with -7, Jimmy Carr. In third place with -14, Clive Anderson. Oh dear. I'm afraid that means this week's loser is Alan with -18. So that's it from Jan, Jimmy, Clive, Alan and me. And I leave you with this. The actress Tallulah Bankhead was in a stall in the ladies' lavatory when she heard somebody leaving the next cubicle and called out, honey, I got no paper in here. Can you see if there's some in your stall? And the woman says, I'm afraid not. So Tallulah says, could you check if by the hand basins there's some paper towels? And the woman says, oh, no, I can't see any there. And Tallulah says, in that case, have you got 2 10s for a 20? Good night.